Two strangers, one glance, and suddenly your heart isn't your own anymore. The rain had been falling since dawn, tapping softly against the windows of Maple Street, washing the dust off the world as if preparing it for something new. Arham stood by the glass, lost in the rhythm of each drop. He had always loved the rain, but today it felt different. He felt restless, as if fate was shifting somewhere just beyond his sight. His gaze drifted toward the small blue house next door, the one that had been empty for months. A "for rent" sign had hung there like a forgotten whisper. But today, it was gone. And someone new was moving in. Arham didn't think much of it at first. New neighbors came, old neighbors left, life kept moving. But then he saw her, a young woman, her hair tied loosely behind her, strands dancing in the wind as she lifted a box from the moving truck. She struggled a little, laughing at her own clumsiness. Something about that laugh stirred something inside him, warmth, curiosity, and a strange ache he couldn't name. He didn't even realize he was staring until she looked up. Their eyes met. It was only a second, maybe two, but it was enough for Arham to feel his breath catch. Her smile was polite, soft, the kind given to a stranger. But that moment, brief, quiet, felt like the beginning of something he didn't understand yet. He stepped back from the window, heart beating faster than it should. Why did he feel this way? He didn't even know her name. Noor wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead. Moving into a new house alone wasn't easy, but there was a strange thrill to it. A fresh start, a new chapter. She'd chosen Maple Street because it felt peaceful, calm, something she desperately needed after months of emotional chaos. She placed another box inside her living room and exhaled deeply. Then she remembered the neighbor, the guy she accidentally made eye contact with. It was just a glance, but she could still see the surprise in his eyes, like he hadn't expected her, like her presence had knocked the balance of his world slightly off-center. She didn't know why that thought made her smile. Maybe because she too felt something she couldn't explain. By late afternoon, Noor stood outside trying to adjust the nameplate on her door. The screw was loose and refused to cooperate. She sighed in frustration. "Need help?" a voice asked. She turned. It was him. Arham stood there awkwardly, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a screwdriver. He offered it to her like a peace treaty. She blinked. "You just walk around with a screwdriver?" His ears turned a little red. "No, I saw you struggling from over there. Thought you might need one." Noor laughed, a soft sound carried by the wind. "Thank you." He stepped closer, tightened the screw, and fixed the nameplate in seconds. "There," he said, "all good." She admired his work. "You're a lifesaver." Arham shrugged, trying to look casual even though his heart was thudding. "I'm your neighbor. It's kind of my job." "Well," she said, extending her hand, "I'm Noor." He hesitated for half a breath before taking her hand. "Arham, Her hand was warm, soft. The moment lasted too long for two strangers. When they finally let go, something unspoken hung between them, light, fragile, and impossibly new. Over the next few days, they kept crossing paths, sometimes deliberately, sometimes by accident. Morning greetings became small conversations. Small conversations became longer ones. Noor discovered that Arham loved old music and late-night books. Arham learned that Noor collected sunsets and always smiled at stray cats. Their differences felt like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. There was no confession, no dramatic moments, just two hearts learning the shape of each other. One evening, Noor was sitting on her porch, sketching the sky. The sunset looked like spilled gold across the horizon. Arham walked out of his house, hesitated, then approached. "You draw?" he asked, stepping closer. "A little," she said shyly. "Can I see?" She handed him the sketchbook. It was simple, just colors blending into one another, soft and warm. "It's beautiful," he said. She shook her head. "It's messy." "Messy can be beautiful," he replied softly. She looked at him, then really looked, and something inside her shifted. His voice, his sincerity, his eyes holding a quiet storm she couldn't decode. "Arham," she said gently, "can I ask something?" "Sure." "Why are you always so kind?" He froze, caught off guard by the question. "I don't know," he said finally. "Maybe because I know what it feels like when life is anything but kind." Noor felt that deeply. She wanted to ask more, but his eyes showed a pain he wasn't ready to share. Instead, she said the only thing she could think of. "Thank you for being you." His heart stumbled. But something was changing. Arham could feel it every time she smiled, every time she laughed, every time she looked at him like she saw something worth seeing. And that scared him, because Arham had been broken before. He had sealed his heart behind quiet walls, safe, untouched, alone. Noor made those walls tremble. She too felt something she wasn't ready to admit. She had come here to escape memories that still hurt. Love had betrayed her once. Trust had shattered like glass. She wasn't supposed to feel anything for anyone. But Arham, he was different, gentle, steady, uncomplicated. And that terrified her more than anything. One night, Noor stood outside staring at the sky. The wind was cold. The world was quiet. Arham stepped out, noticing her shiver. "You okay?" he asked. She looked at him, her eyes softer than the moonlight. "I don't know," she whispered. He stepped closer, not touching, just near enough to offer warmth. "You can talk to me," he said, "if you want." Noor took a shaky breath. "I'm scared of getting close to people." Arham swallowed. "Why?" "Because I fall too deeply," she said, "and I'd break too easily." He looked at her for a long moment. His own walls trembled again. "So do I," he admitted. their eyes locked, fragile, vulnerable, understanding. It wasn't a confession, but it was something deeper, something neither of them had said out loud. Two neighbors, two broken hearts, one unexpected love beginning to grow. And as the night wrapped around them, the distance between their two doors finally felt smaller. Much smaller. The days passed like a slow, deliberate melody. Rain turned to sunshine, sunshine to the gentle whispers of autumn winds, and yet the quiet connection between Arham and Noor only grew. They hadn't spoken of love, not directly, yet every glance, every shared laugh, every accidental brush of hands seemed to write a story words could not capture. Arham found himself lingering near her porch more often than he intended. He told himself it was coincidence, or perhaps a neighborly concern, but deep inside, he knew it was something else, a magnetic pull, impossible to ignore. He noticed the way she hummed to herself while watering her plants, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled at a stray dog, the way her hair fell across her face when she laughed at her own clumsiness. Each detail etched itself into his mind, a collection of small, fragile treasures that belonged only to him. Noor, meanwhile, felt a flutter she couldn't quite name. Each day, Arham's presence was both comforting and unnerving. There was safety in the warmth of his words, yet danger in the way her heart seemed to betray her, racing whenever he was near. She told herself it was merely gratitude, admiration, the ease of having someone who understood. But as her mind replayed their interactions, she felt an ache she had not experienced in years, a longing for connection, for something real, for someone who made her feel seen. One crisp afternoon, a neighborhood picnic brought them together. Families gathered with blankets and baskets, the air filled with laughter and the scent of freshly baked bread. Noor had reluctantly agreed to join after a casual invitation from Arham. She hadn't expected it to matter much, but the moment she saw him laughing with children nearby, her chest tightened. He looked effortless, genuine, every line of his face alive with warmth. She watched him from a distance, debating whether to approach. But before she could decide, Arham spotted her. His eyes lit up, and a grin spread across his face that made her heart flutter like leaves in the wind. He walked toward her, careful not to stumble over the picnic blankets, careful not to fall into the gravity she seemed to exert simply by existing. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, familiar, yet carrying an unspoken weight. "Hi," she replied, a little breathless, her fingers nervously fiddling with the hem of her scarf. "You saved me from doing all the heavy lifting yesterday," he said lightly, as if that were the most important thing in the world. "I think I'm the one who owes you," she said, and their laughter mingled, a harmony that seemed to pull the rest of the world away. For hours, they wandered through the picnic, sharing stories, teasing each other, and stealing glances that neither dared to acknowledge aloud. It was simple, yet complex, intense without words, a tension growing silently like the first stirrings of a storm. Yet life, as it often does, crept in with the weight of reality. Noor had bills to pay, responsibilities to uphold, and a heart that was weary from past betrayals. She loved the lightness Arham brought, but the fear of losing herself or him kept her from giving in completely. She noticed the way her heart raced when he touched her hand, the way her chest ached when he laughed at something only she could understand. Yet she also remembered the walls she had built around herself, the careful armor she had worn for so long. Letting him in meant risking it all. Arham, too, was battling his own demons. He had loved before, only to have his heart fractured in ways he still hadn't fully healed from. He told himself he was cautious, responsible, rational. And yet, each time Noor smiled at him, each time their hands brushed, each time she leaned slightly closer than necessary, he felt the old rules crumble. He wanted her. He feared her. He wanted to confess, but the timing was never right, and the words never seemed enough. One evening, the air cool and scented with the promise of rain, Arham invited Noor for tea on his porch. Important thing in the world. I think I'm the one who owes you, she said, and their laughter mingled, a harmony that seemed to pull the rest of the world away. For hours, they wandered through the picnic, sharing stories, teasing each other, and stealing glances that neither dared to acknowledge aloud. It was simple, yet complex, intense without words, a tension growing silently like the first stirrings of a storm. Yet life, as it often does, crept in with the weight of reality. Noor had bills to pay, responsibilities to uphold, and a heart that was weary from past betrayals. She loved the lightness Arham brought, but the fear of losing herself or him kept her from giving in completely. She noticed the way her heart raced when he touched her hand, the way her chest ached when he laughed at something only she could understand. Yet she also remembered the walls she had built around herself, the careful armor she had worn for so long. Letting him in meant risking it all. Arham, too, was battling his own demons. He had loved before, only to have his heart fractured in ways he still hadn't fully healed from. He told himself he was cautious, responsible, rational. And yet, each time Noor smiled at him, each time their hands brushed, each time she leaned slightly closer than necessary, he felt the old rules crumble. He wanted her. He feared her. He wanted to confess, but the timing was never right, and the words never seemed enough. One evening, the air cool and scented with the promise of rain, Arham invited Noor for tea on his porch. The world around them was quiet, the street nearly empty, the sun casting long golden shadows across their faces. She accepted with a nervous nod, her heart thumping louder than she wished it would. They sat together, two steaming mugs between them, and for a while nothing needed to be said. Silence was enough comfortable, charged, electric. You ever think, Arham began slowly, that people come into our lives for reasons we don't always understand? Noor glanced at him, intrigued. What do you mean? He looked out at the street, his jaw tight, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. Sometimes someone appears and everything else, it just shifts. You feel it in the smallest ways. A glance, a laugh, a word. She wanted to look away but couldn't. His gaze held her captive, pulling her into something deeper than herself. And if that person scares you, she whispered, then maybe they're the person worth facing the fear for, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But each word struck her with precision, leaving echoes in her chest. The rain began then, a soft drizzle that painted the world silver. They didn't move. The drops tapped rhythmically on the roof, on the leaves, on the street, and somehow it felt intimate, like a secret just for them. Noor felt the pull she had been resisting for weeks. Her hand twitched, a subtle desire to reach out, to let him know, to cross the unspoken line. Arham noticed, and his heart skipped not from surprise, but from anticipation, from knowing that the moment was fragile, precious, and fleeting. Noor began, then paused, her words failing her. Arham reached gently, covering her hand with his. The warmth of his palm, the solid reassurance, was enough to make her breath hitch. You don't have to say anything, he said softly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I already know. Her heart trembled at the intimacy of that statement. She wanted to hide, to run, to protect herself from the inevitable fall, but she also wanted to stay, to lean into the pull, to surrender to the strange magnetic force drawing them together. They sat like that for what felt like hours, letting the rain, the silence, and the electricity between them do all the talking. Yet, the world was never silent for long. The following days brought small misunderstandings. Arham noticed Noor stepping back when he lingered a moment too long. Noor saw the shadow of doubt cross his face when she mentioned her past. They were both afraid of the same thing, falling too deeply, too fast, and losing themselves in a love neither had dared to expect. And still, despite the fear, the desire persisted. Each encounter carried a tension they could neither ignore nor fully name. Their hearts were entangled in a delicate dance, one misstep away from heartbreak, one glance away from confession. Noor found herself sketching their moments together, trying to make sense of the feelings she could not yet speak. Arham found himself talking to her when he should have been working, listening when he should have been alone, learning every nuance of her smile, every quirk, every vulnerability. They were two neighbors, two strangers once, two souls navigating the unexpected gravity of something neither could have anticipated. And every day, every small interaction, every fleeting touch pulled them closer, like tides inexorably drawn to the moon. The first part of the story had been about recognition. Part 2, their hearts were beginning to collide. And in the quiet moments, the pauses between words, the almost confessions, both of them understood that the most dangerous, thrilling, and terrifying thing in the world was already happening. They were falling in love. But the question remained, could they overcome their fears? Could they dare to cross the unspoken threshold before life or circumstance intervened? The answer hovered, delicate and uncertain, just beyond reach. 2 doors, 2 hearts, one love quietly, beautifully, dangerously blooming. The golden haze of autumn had turned into a crisp, chilled winter. Maple Street glistened under a thin coat of frost, the kind that made breath visible and hearts ache in the silence. Arham and Noor had continued their slow dance of connection and restraint, each encounter a spark, each moment a temptation neither could fully act upon. But the universe, it seemed, had a way of forcing hearts into truth. It started with a letter. Noor found it slipped under her door, the handwriting familiar yet foreign in its intensity. She picked it up, feeling the weight of it in her hands. Her name was written at the top, simple, delicate, and perfect. She hesitated, then unfolded it, reading the words that poured out like a river she could no longer stop. Noor, I can no longer pretend that I am not falling for you. Every day, every smile, every laugh, it consumes me. I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to run from what I feel. I only want to stand here with you, letting the world fade around us. Arham. Her heart thundered. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of months of unspoken tension, quiet longing, and emotional restraint. She read it again and again. The warmth, the sincerity, the vulnerability. It struck a chord in her chest she hadn't dared to explore. For the first time, Noor allowed herself to feel without fear. That evening, as the street glowed under the soft amber light of street lamps, Noor stepped outside. She held a scarf around her neck, but it did little to hide the nervous anticipation in her chest. Across the street, Arham emerged, as if drawn by the same invisible force that now commanded her steps. Neither spoke at first. The silence was heavy, electric, and yet comforting in its honesty. I got your letter, Noor said softly, her voice trembling like the leaves in the wind. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you, Arham admitted, taking a step closer. I didn't know if it was too soon. Too soon? She whispered, almost laughing at the absurdity. It's been months, and yet it feels like you've been here forever. Arham's eyes softened. I've been trying not to fall, but I couldn't stop it, Noor. Not when you make me feel alive. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The cold air made their breaths visible, mingling, forming clouds that seemed to echo their hesitation. I've been scared too, she confessed. Scared of losing myself. Scared of being hurt again. But I can't stop thinking about you. The words hung between them, fragile yet powerful, breaking the final barriers they had built around their hearts. Then, as if pulled by fate, Arham reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, the warmth from the simple touch spreading through both of them like wildfire. "I don't want to be scared anymore," he said. "I just want you." Noor's eyes glistened, and she nodded, stepping closer until their foreheads rested together. The street, the frost, the distant hum of the city, all of it vanished. There was only this moment, fragile and eternal, a pause where the world held its breath with them. Days turned into weeks, and the love that had begun quietly, cautiously, now blossomed like the first flowers of spring breaking through winter's grasp. Arham and Noor found themselves in moments small and intimate, yet monumental to them. Morning coffees became sacred rituals, shared in silence that spoke volumes. Evening walks became confessions without words, each glance and brush of hands a silent promise. Laughter and comfort replaced hesitation, and the tension that had once defined their relationship transformed into a gentle, unbreakable connection. Yet, as with all things worth having, the journey wasn't without its obstacles. Noor's past sometimes shadowed her joy. A sudden pang of fear would strike when she remembered heartbreaks that had left her wary. Arham, in turn, wrestled with doubt. Was he truly enough for someone as radiant and resilient as Noor? But they faced these doubts together. They learned to speak when words were hard, to hold when fears rose, and to trust in the bond that had started as a simple glance across the street and grown into something that neither could imagine living without. It was on one particularly cold evening, under a sky painted with the deepest hues of twilight, that Arham made a decision. He led Noor to the little garden behind his house, where fairy lights flickered like stars, reflecting softly on the frost-covered ground. There was a small bench, a blanket thrown over it, and the faint scent of vanilla candles lingering in the air. "I've wanted to do this for a long time," he said, voice trembling slightly but determined. Noor looked at him, heart fluttering. "Do what?" He knelt on one knee, a simple velvet box opening to reveal a delicate ring, modest yet radiant, like the love it represented. "I don't have grand words, Noor, but I know this life is unpredictable, messy, and sometimes cruel. And yet, meeting you, it's been the most beautiful accident I could have ever hoped for. Will you be mine? Will you let me love you completely and without fear?" Noor felt tears prick at her eyes. Every fear, every hesitation melted away in that moment, replaced by clarity, by certainty, by a love that was patient, real, and profound. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "Yes, Arham, I'll let you." He smiled, relief and joy flooding his face, and together they embraced. The cold didn't matter, the frost didn't matter, the world didn't matter. There was only them two neighbors, two souls, one love that had begun unexpectedly and grown impossibly beautifully unstoppable. Weeks later, life continued, but nothing was ordinary anymore. Every morning began with a shared smile. Every evening ended with laughter and warmth. Their home became a sanctuary, their connection a refuge from the uncertainties of the world. And sometimes, when the street was quiet, Arham and Noor would stand by their windows, watching the world together. One glance, one touch, one smile, and the memory of their slow blooming love lingered, a reminder that some things were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth surrendering to completely. The rain, the frost, the sunsets, the quiet moments they had led them here. Two doors had once separated them. Now nothing could separate their hearts. Because love, when unexpected and unforced, had a way of rewriting destinies. And for Arham and Noor, Maple Street was no longer just a place they had found home in each other. The unexpected love had arrived, and it stayed. From neighbors to soulmates, witness the magic of love. Hit like, subscribe, and join us for more heart-stirring stories.